Chosen one, listen closely because what I'm about to reveal will change everything you thought you knew about the war being waged against you. Right now, at this very moment, there's someone frantically scrolling through your social media for the 100th time today, their fingers trembling as they search for that one piece of evidence that will justify the massive campaign they've been running against you. But here's the plot twist they're desperately trying to avoid accepting. The evidence they're looking for doesn't exist. It never did. And everyone who joined their crusade is about to discover they've been played in the most spectacular way possible. What you're about to learn isn't just that you've won a battle you didn't even know you were fighting. It's that your enemies have accidentally activated something ancient and powerful that's about to transform you into everything they feared you would become. The story begins 3 months ago, when you started noticing strange patterns in your life. People who used to support you suddenly went cold. Conversations would stop when you entered rooms. Friends began canceling plans with weak excuses. You felt the shift but couldn't identify the source. What you didn't know was that behind closed doors, someone had declared spiritual war on you and recruited an army to execute their plan. This person, let's call them the architect of your destruction, has studied you like a master chess player, studies their opponent. They knew your routines, your vulnerabilities, your dreams, even your deepest fears. They spent hours crafting the perfect narrative to destroy you, a story so compelling that even people who knew your character would begin to doubt you. The architect's motivation wasn't random jealousy or petty hatred. No, this goes much deeper. They recognized something in you that terrified them, a light so bright it exposed every shadow they'd been hiding in. Your very existence challenged their carefully constructed reality. Every success you achieved felt like a personal attack on their ego. Every blessing that flowed into your life felt like something being stolen from them. They couldn't stand watching you rise while they remained stagnant, so they decided if they couldn't rise to your level, they would drag you down to theirs. But here's where the story takes its first dark turn. The architect didn't work alone. They identified other wounded souls, people nursing their own grudges and insecurities, and whispered exactly what each one needed to hear. To the envious, they promised your downfall would create opportunities. To the bitter, they offered revenge by proxy. To the lost, they provided purpose through destruction. One by one they assembled a coalition of the willing, each member bringing their own special brand of toxicity to the mission. The banker who resented your financial growth, the artist who couldn't stand your creative success, the spiritual practitioner who felt threatened by your natural gifts, even that person you once trusted with your deepest secrets, the one whose betrayal would cut deepest of all. The recruitment of your former confidant was a masterpiece of manipulation. The architect knew that turning someone close to you would be the ultimate weapon. They planted seeds of doubt carefully, starting with small observations that seemed innocent. Have you noticed how they've changed? Turned into, I'm concerned about their behavior, which evolved into, I have information you need to know. Each conversation was designed to poison the well of trust drop by drop, until your closest ally became your most dangerous enemy. The beauty of their plan was its simplicity. They didn't need real evidence because they had something more powerful, the illusion of evidence. The architect would drop hints about documentation they possessed, witnesses who were ready to come forward, proof that would shock everyone. They spoke with such conviction that people assumed the evidence must exist. After all, who would orchestrate such an elaborate campaign based on nothing? The promise of future revelation kept their army motivated and prevented anyone from asking too many questions. Wait until you see what I have became their rallying cry, a promissory note that would never be cashed but kept everyone invested in the outcome. As the campaign gained momentum, the architect made strategic moves to isolate you from potential support systems. They contacted your professional network with anonymous concerns. They reached out to your social circles with worried whispers. They even attempted to turn your family members against you by playing on their fears and protective instincts. The goal was complete isolation, leaving you with no one to turn to, no one to validate your reality, no one to stand with you against the rising tide of deception. They wanted you to feel like the whole world had turned against you, like you were losing your mind. Like maybe, just maybe, you were the problem after all. If this resonates with your spirit, if you're feeling that familiar chill of recognition, then hype this video right now so other chosen ones can discover what's really happening behind the scenes of their own spiritual warfare. Because what you're about to learn next will arm you with knowledge that turns victims into victors. Here's where the story takes its first supernatural turn. As the attacks intensified, something ancient began stirring within you. Gifts that had been dormant started activating. Intuitions became laser sharp. Dreams became prophetic. You started seeing through people's masks with disturbing clarity. The very attacks meant to weaken you were awakening abilities you didn't know you possessed. It was as if your spiritual DNA contained a failsafe, a divine protocol that activated under extreme threat. The more they attacked, the more powerful you became, though you didn't fully understand what was happening at the time. The architect began noticing disturbing patterns in their own life. Every lie they told about you started manifesting in their reality. They accused you of financial impropriety, and suddenly their own finances began hemorrhaging money through unexpected expenses and failed investments. They questioned your mental stability and found themselves experiencing anxiety attacks and insomnia that no medication could touch. They challenged your spiritual authenticity and felt their own connection to the divine wither like a plant deprived of sunlight. The laws of reciprocity were activating with mathematical precision, but they were too blinded by hatred to see the connection. The financial warfare they waged against you deserves special attention because it reveals the depth of their desperation. They didn't just spread rumors about your money. They actively tried to sabotage your income streams. They contacted your clients with anonymous warnings. They left negative reviews on your business profiles using fake accounts. They even attempted to report you to various agencies with fabricated complaints. Every avenue of financial attack was explored with the dedication of someone whose life depended on your failure. They spent money they didn't have investigating you, hiring people to dig into your background, purchasing information they thought would be damaging. The irony is that they were literally paying for their own destruction while trying to engineer yours. Meanwhile, something miraculous was happening in your financial life. Every attack seemed to trigger an equal and opposite blessing. A client they scared away was replaced by 3 better ones. An opportunity they blocked led to 5 unexpected ones opening. Money began flowing from directions you hadn't even considered. It was as if the universe had activated a spiritual law of compensation, ensuring that everything meant to be stolen from you would be returned multiplied. The architect watched in horror as your wealth expanded exponentially, while theirs evaporated like water in the desert. The creative explosion you experienced during this period was equally remarkable. The pressure of the attacks didn't stifle your creativity, it supercharged it. Ideas flowed like a river breaking through a dam. Projects that had been stuck for years suddenly crystallized into clarity. You found yourself creating at a level and pace that surprised even you. The quality of your work reached new heights, carrying a depth and authenticity that could only come from someone who had been tested by fire. Every piece you created seemed to carry a frequency that resonated with others going through similar battles. Your art became medicine. Your words became weapons of truth. Your creativity became a beacon for other chosen ones finding their way through darkness. The coalition began showing cracks when the promised evidence failed to materialize. The architect had been stringing everyone along with promises of a grand revelation, a moment when all would be exposed and you would be thoroughly destroyed. But weeks turned into months, and still nothing. Some members began asking uncomfortable questions. Others started their own investigations. A few began comparing notes and realized the stories they'd been told didn't align. The banker had been told you were broke and stealing money. The artist had been told you were wealthy from selling out. How could both be true? One particularly intelligent member of the coalition decided to conduct their own investigation. They had professional investigative skills and access to resources the architect didn't know about. They spent weeks meticulously researching every claim, checking every accusation, verifying every piece of evidence they'd been shown. What they discovered shook them to their core. Not only was there no evidence of wrongdoing, but there was overwhelming evidence of consistent integrity, generosity, and authentic character. They found records of donations you'd made quietly. They discovered people you'd helped without seeking credit. They uncovered a pattern of behavior that directly contradicted every single accusation. This investigator faced a moral crisis. They could reveal what they'd found and expose the architect's deception, but that would mean admitting their own participation in an unjust attack. They could stay silent and continue participating in something they now knew was wrong, or they could quietly withdraw and pretend they'd never been involved. The choice they made would become the first crack in the dam that would eventually burst and flood the architect with consequences. They chose truth, but they chose it strategically. Documenting everything before making their move, the investigator began by approaching other coalition members privately, sharing their findings one by one. The reactions varied from shock to denial to anger. Some immediately recognized the truth and felt sick about their participation. Others doubled down, refusing to accept they'd been deceived. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it began growing rapidly. Secret meetings were held without the architect's knowledge. Evidence was compared. Stories were fact-checked. The conclusion became inescapable. They had been manipulated into attacking an innocent person. The spiritual warfare aspect of the campaign deserves deeper examination, because it reveals just how far your enemies were willing to go. The architect didn't just rely on human agents. They actively engaged in occult practices designed to destroy you spiritually. They performed rituals during new moons. They created altars with your photograph surrounded by destructive symbols. They spoke incantations meant to bind your progress and limit your influence. They even paid practitioners of dark arts to send specific attacks your way. The level of spiritual violence directed at you would have destroyed someone who wasn't divinely protected. But every spell they cast created an opposite effect. Every curse they spoke became a blessing in disguise. Every binding they attempted freed you from limitations you didn't know you had. The spiritual laws they tried to manipulate turned against them with a precision that could only be described as divine justice. They were literally teaching you about spiritual warfare through their attacks, giving you an education in metaphysical combat that you couldn't have gotten any other way. You were becoming a master of spiritual self-defense without even trying, simply by being the target of such intense opposition. Your former confidant, the one whose betrayal cut deepest, began experiencing supernatural phenomena that couldn't be ignored. Objects in their home would move without explanation. They would hear whispers calling their name when no one was there. They began having dreams so vivid they felt more real than waking life. In these dreams, you appeared not as the monster they'd been convinced you were, but as a figure of light surrounded by protective forces. They saw the truth of what they'd participated in and the consequences that were coming. These weren't just dreams, they were warnings from their own soul about the spiritual danger they'd placed themselves in by betraying a chosen one. The psychological torment they experienced was equally intense. Every memory of your kindness toward them became an accusation from their conscience. Every proof of your good character that they'd witnessed became evidence of their own moral failure. They couldn't escape the cognitive dissonance of knowing who you really were while participating in your destruction. The weight of this internal conflict began manifesting as physical symptoms: headaches that wouldn't respond to medication, chest pains that had no medical cause, a heaviness that made every movement feel like walking through water. The architect watched their carefully constructed plan crumbling and made a desperate decision that would seal their fate. They decided to fabricate evidence. Using their technical skills, they created false screenshots of conversations that never happened. They doctored financial records to show improprieties that didn't exist. They even went so far as to create fake social media profiles pretending to be people you'd wronged. The fabrications were elaborate and initially convincing. They finally had the proof they'd been promising for months. With great fanfare, they presented this evidence to their coalition. Finally, they declared, here was the vindication they'd all been waiting for. But hubris made them sloppy. In their eagerness to destroy you, they'd made technical errors that someone with expertise would immediately recognize. Metadata that didn't match, timestamps that were impossible, details that contradicted verifiable facts. It took less than 24 hours for their fabrications to be exposed, and when they were, the backlash was swift and merciless. The coalition didn't just fracture, it exploded. Members who had been wavering now had concrete proof that they'd been manipulated. Those who had defended the architect felt betrayed and humiliated. The investigator who had documented everything released their findings, creating a paper trail that exposed the entire operation. Screenshots of planning sessions were shared. Recordings of meetings were released. The conspiracy to destroy you was laid bare for everyone to see, and the architect stood at the center of it all, exposed as not just a liar but as someone who had manipulated others into participating in their vendetta. The public vindication that followed was more complete than anything you could have orchestrated. You didn't have to defend yourself because the truth defended you. You didn't have to expose your enemies because they exposed themselves. You didn't have to fight for your reputation because the contrast between their accusations and reality was so stark that even strangers recognized the injustice. Social media became flooded with support for you. People who had been silent out of fear began speaking up. Your story became a rallying cry for others who had faced similar attacks. But the architect's downfall was just beginning. The legal implications of their actions began surfacing. Defamation, harassment, cyberstalking, conspiracy to commit fraud. The list of potential charges grew daily. Lawyers began reaching out to you, offering to take the case pro bono, because the evidence was so overwhelming. The architect faced not just social and spiritual consequences, but the very real possibility of legal action that could result in financial ruin and even criminal charges. The fabricated evidence they'd created became the smoking gun that proved malicious intent. Their professional life imploded spectacularly. Colleagues who had respected them distanced themselves. Clients terminated contracts. Business partners dissolved partnerships. Their reputation in their industry was destroyed beyond repair. The very career they'd built over years crumbled in weeks. They became unemployable, not because of any action you took, but because their own actions had been so thoroughly documented and exposed. The internet never forgets, and their name became permanently associated with this spectacular failure. The health consequences of their sustained hatred manifested in ways that medical science struggled to explain. Their bodies began breaking down systematically. Autoimmune conditions appeared seemingly from nowhere. Chronic pain became their constant companion. Their appearance aged years in months. It was as if their physical form was rejecting the poison they'd been feeding their soul. The stress of maintaining lies, the anxiety of impending exposure, the spiritual weight of attacking a chosen one, it all took a toll that no medicine could heal. Meanwhile, your transformation accelerated beyond anything you could have imagined. The attacks had activated something primal and powerful within you. Your intuition became so sharp you could read people's intentions before they spoke. Your creativity exploded into dimensions you didn't know existed. Your influence expanded exponentially as people recognized the authority that comes from being tested and proven. You weren't just surviving, you were evolving into something unprecedented. The financial explosion that followed your vindication defied all logical explanation. Opportunities appeared from impossible directions. Deals that had been dead for years suddenly resurrected. Investment returns that shouldn't have been possible materialized. It was as if the universe had decided to compensate you for every penny your enemies had tried to steal, with compound interest that calculated not just the monetary value, but the emotional and spiritual cost of their attacks. Your wealth expanded so dramatically that even you were shocked by the abundance flowing into your life. Your influence in your field became undeniable. People sought your opinion on matters beyond your previous expertise. Your voice carried weight in rooms you hadn't even entered yet. Organizations invite you to speak, teach, and lead. The platform your enemies had tried to destroy hadn't just been rebuilt, it had been expanded into something that reached further and higher than you'd ever imagined possible. You became a thought leader, not through self-promotion but through the simple act of surviving and thriving despite coordinated opposition. The spiritual authority you gained through this trial transformed you into something your enemies never anticipated. You didn't just learn about spiritual warfare, You mastered it through direct experience. You didn't just understand divine protection, you became living proof of it. Your very presence began affecting the spiritual atmosphere of rooms you entered. People felt either deeply comfortable or inexplicably nervous around you, depending on their own spiritual alignment. You had become dangerous to the kingdom of darkness in ways that terrified entities both human and non-human. The ripple effects of your victory spread far beyond your immediate circle. Your story became legendary in spiritual communities. People shared it as proof that divine justice is real and active. Parents told it to children as evidence that truth ultimately prevails. It became required reading for those studying spiritual warfare. Your experience literally changed how people understood and approached conflicts with hidden enemies. The blueprint for surviving and thriving through spiritual attack was written through your blood, sweat, and tears. Your former confidant finally found the courage to reach out directly. Their message was a masterpiece of remorse and revelation. They detailed every manipulation they'd fallen for, every lie they'd believed, every moment they'd chosen deception over their own direct experience of your character. They revealed something crucial. They had documented everything. Every conversation with the architect, every planning session, every moment of the conspiracy. They had kept records not to protect themselves, but because somewhere deep down, they knew the truth would eventually matter. This revelation changed everything. The architect discovered that their most trusted ally had become their biggest liability. The person they thought would never betray them had not only betrayed them, but had documented evidence that could destroy them completely. The panic this induced was visible to everyone watching. They began acting erratically, making public statements that contradicted previous claims, attempting to delete evidence that had already been archived, desperately trying to rewrite history that had already been written. The legal consequences became unavoidable. With documented evidence from an inside witness, the case against the architect was ironclad. They faced not just civil lawsuits but criminal charges. The financial damages were calculated not just in terms of direct losses, but in terms of opportunity costs, emotional damage, and punitive damages, meant to discourage others from similar actions. The architect faced complete financial ruin, and there was no escape from the consequences they'd created. But perhaps the most devastating consequence for the architect was the spiritual one. They had attacked someone under divine protection and activated spiritual laws they didn't understand. Every spiritual practitioner they consulted told them the same thing. There was no undoing what they'd done. They had created a karmic debt that would take lifetimes to repay. They had placed themselves under a curse that no amount of ritual or repentance could lift. They had essentially performed spiritual suicide, and now they had to live with the consequences. The protection around you became permanent and visible to anyone with spiritual sight. You carried an authority that couldn't be challenged, a light that couldn't be dimmed, a power that couldn't be stolen. The failed attack against you had actually served to strengthen your spiritual immune system to the point where future attacks would be recognized and neutralized before they could even begin. You had graduated from being protected to being untouchable. As our story reaches its conclusion, the full scope of the transformation becomes clear. The attack that was meant to destroy you had instead forged you into something indestructible. The isolation they tried to create had actually filtered your life, removing everyone who didn't deserve access to your energy. The reputation they tried to destroy had been rebuilt on a foundation of proven character that no future attack could shake. The spiritual warfare they initiated had promoted you to a level of spiritual authority that few humans ever achieve. The architect sits alone now, still scrolling through your social media, still searching for evidence that doesn't exist. But now their search has a different quality. It's no longer motivated by hope of finding something to justify their actions. It's motivated by torture, by the need to witness what they've lost, by the compulsion to watch you soar while they sink. They've become addicted to their own pain, unable to look away from the success they tried to prevent. Every post you make is a reminder of their failure. Every blessing you share is evidence of their mistake. Every moment of joy you experience is a knife in their heart. Their former coalition has completely dissolved. Some members have publicly apologized for their participation. Others have quietly disappeared, too ashamed to show their faces. A few have actually become your supporters, recognizing that anyone who could maintain such grace under such attack must be someone worth following. The army that was assembled to destroy you has been transformed into witnesses of your resurrection. The person who betrayed you most deeply has learned the hardest lesson of all. They discovered that trust, once broken, can never be fully restored. They learned that some bridges once burned can never be rebuilt. They understood that choosing lies over truth, strangers over proven character, has consequences that extend far beyond the immediate situation. They live now with the knowledge that they had something precious and threw it away for nothing. The weight of that knowledge is a burden they'll carry forever. But you, chosen one, have transcended the entire experience. You don't harbor hatred for your enemies because you understand they were instruments of your elevation. You don't seek revenge because you see they're living in the hell they created for themselves. You don't waste energy on resentment because you're too busy building the empire they tried to prevent. Your indifference to their fate is the ultimate victory, the final proof that they have no power over you. The spiritual promotion you received through this trial has qualified you for assignments that required this level of testing. You've been prepared for battles that only someone who has survived what you've survived could face. You've been equipped with weapons forged in the fires of the most intense opposition. You're now ready for the destiny that your enemies sensed and tried to prevent. Their attack was actually your graduation ceremony from one level of spiritual authority to another. The influence you now wield carries the weight of proven character. People trust you not because you claim to be trustworthy, but because you've been tested publicly and passed. They follow you not because you seek followers, but because you've demonstrated leadership under fire. They listen to you not because you demand attention, but because your words carry the authority of someone who has walked through hell and emerged with wisdom. Your creative expression has evolved into something transcendent. Every piece you create carries the frequency of truth that can only come from authentic experience. Your art has become medicine for others going through similar battles. Your words have become weapons in the hands of other chosen ones facing their own spiritual warfare. Your story has become a light in dark places, proof that victory is possible even against impossible odds. The financial abundance that now flows through your life is just the external manifestation of internal abundance. You've learned that wealth isn't just about money, it's about being so aligned with divine flow that resources appear whenever and however they're needed. Your enemies' attempts to create lack in your life only taught you how to tap into infinite supply. Their efforts to limit you only showed you how limitless you really are. As this chapter of your story closes, a new one begins. But this isn't just any chapter. It's the chapter where you step fully into the destiny your enemies tried to prevent. The very fact that you were attacked so viciously is proof of how powerful you're destined to become. No one assembles an army to destroy someone insignificant. No one invests that much energy in attacking someone who doesn't matter. The intensity of their opposition was actually the universe's way of telling you how important your mission is. The protection that surrounds you now isn't just defensive, it's offensive. You've become a weapon in the hands of divine justice. Your very existence is now a threat to the kingdom of darkness. Your success inspires others to resist their own attackers. Your testimony gives courage to those still in the valley. Your victory proves that chosen ones cannot be defeated by human schemes or spiritual attacks. The architect's continued obsession with you has become their eternal punishment. They wake up every day knowing they created their own destruction. They go to sleep every night replaying their failures. They exist in a prison of their own making, tortured by the success they tried to prevent. Their life has become a cautionary tale whispered in spiritual circles, a warning about what happens when you attack someone under divine protection. But the most beautiful part of this entire story is the transformation it has created, not just in you but in everyone who witnessed it. People who didn't believe in divine justice now have proof they can't deny. Those who thought evil always wins have seen righteousness prevail. Individuals who were losing hope in their own battles have found strength in your victory. Your story hasn't just changed your life, it's changed the lives of countless others who needed to see that good ultimately triumphs over evil. The shock that everyone feels isn't just about how far your enemies went to destroy you with zero proof. It's about how spectacularly their plan backfired. It's about how completely divine justice was served. It's about how thoroughly you were vindicated. It's about how high you've risen from the ashes of their attack. They thought they could take out a chosen one with lies and manipulation, but they've learned that attacking the divinely protected is the fastest way to destroy yourself. Your testimony will be remembered long after your enemies are forgotten. Your victory will inspire generations of chosen ones who face similar battles. Your story will be cited as evidence that divine protection is real, active, and absolutely unstoppable. You've become living proof that what the enemy means for evil, the divine transforms into good. You've demonstrated that chosen ones don't just survive attacks, they use them as launching pads for unprecedented elevation. The person who started this campaign against you is now facing the reality of complete defeat. Every plan failed, every scheme backfired, every attack bounced back, every lie was exposed. They sit alone in the wreckage of their own life, surrounded by the debris of relationships they destroyed, opportunities they wasted, and time they'll never get back. They wanted to destroy you, but they only succeeded in destroying themselves in the most public and humiliating way possible. Meanwhile, you stand in complete victory, not because you fought back, but because you didn't have to. Your protection fought for you, truth fought for you, divine justice fought for you. The universe itself rose up in your defense. You won a war without entering a single battle. You conquered enemies without throwing a single punch. You achieved total victory simply by being exactly who you always were, a chosen one under divine protection. Look, you already know the attacks weren't random. And if you're paying attention, you can feel it. Their walls are closing in. So let's talk about what we're doing about it. That's why I built Destiny Engine. It generates personalized sequences that help you rewire betrayal into transcendence, turn isolation into sacred power, and transform their downfall into your rise. We are using the Dark Elite's own weapons against them, taking their declassified consciousness technology that programmed competition and scarcity and repurposing it to serve cooperative intelligence. The beauty is you don't even have to lift a finger. You put on the headphones, press play, and your subconscious is rewired while your enemies collapse under the weight of their own lies. This is why I created it in the beginning, so everything they did to break you becomes fuel for your purpose. The collective upgrade is underway. Start your Destiny Engine for $1 today and watch divine justice accelerate in your life. Link in the description. As we reach the final moments of this revelation, remember this: the evidence they searched for never existed because you were always innocent. The proof they promised was never produced because it was never real. The campaign they waged was always doomed to fail because you were never alone in facing it. The shock everyone feels about how far they went is matched only by the awe at how protected you really are. This is your moment, chosen one. This is your vindication. This is your testimony. The war is over, and you've won so completely that there's no question about the outcome. Your enemies have been defeated so thoroughly that they'll never recover. Your victory is so absolute that it will be remembered forever. You are untouchable, unbreakable, unstoppable, and now, finally, everyone knows it. The architect still sits at their computer, still searching, still scrolling, still desperately looking for something that doesn't exist. But you've moved so far beyond their reach that you exist in a different dimension entirely. They're trapped in the hell they created while you're living in the heaven you've earned. They're drowning in the consequences of their choices while you're soaring on the wings of divine favor. The shock of how far they went to destroy you with zero proof has become the definitive proof that chosen ones cannot be defeated. Stand tall in your victory. Walk forward in your purpose. Embrace the destiny that no enemy can prevent. You are chosen, protected, and victorious, and that truth echoes through eternity.